Hello, my name is Jill Lucas-Drakeford, and today we're going to be talking about safe infant sleep. I am a childhood injury prevention specialist. I'm a health educator and the Safe Kids coordinator for Crowing Clinic Children's Hospital. I've been doing this job for over 15 years now, and I absolutely love it. But there are times I don't really like it either. And the reason I have to keep doing my job is unfortunately because children keep getting injured and killed due to unintentional injuries. So, what we do as a healthcare system in our communities is try to get information out to parents, caregivers, and professionals in order for them to know what they need to do and what they can do in order to keep their children and their infants safe. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, our topic today is infant safe sleep. What we need to know is that for infants, sleeping environments is really, really important because we need to make sure that they are safe in this environment in order to be able to survive. Most of us have probably all heard of SIDS. And SIDS, or crib death as we know it, is something that affects way too many children every single year across the nation. Almost between 3,000 and 4,000 infants die every single year from this. And it's so, so tragic, and so much of it is preventable. So it is the leading cause of death in infants from 1 year up to a year of age. So from birth to a year of age, it is the number one reason that infants die. And we're going to talk about today all of the things that we can do to try to help prevent that. We do need to know that your infant is going to be at increased risk if they are under 4 months of age. So all of our babies are going to be at that point at that stage at some point. Also, if they are a premature or multiple birth. So premature births are considered anything before 37 weeks. And a lot of times multiple births are always premature. And sometimes if they are anywhere between 24 to 27 weeks, that really puts them at a higher risk. And we see a lot of babies being born in around that age at our NICU here. Also, race has a risk factor involved with it as well. So if they're African American or American Indian or Alaskan Native race, it puts them at increased risk. So if you think about it, if your child falls into several of these categories, it's going to be especially important for you to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to keep your baby safe. So back in the 1990s, we started the Back to Sleep program through the National Institute of Health. So back then, there were anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 infants dying every single year, and it was just unbelievable, and the tragedies that all of these families faced. And so they started doing a lot of studies and investigations on why this was happening and what they needed to do and possibly could do in order to help prevent some of these deaths. And what they found was that if the only thing that you did was put your baby to sleep on their back, that would decrease their risk of dying from SIDS or crib death. So it is the single most effective action that anybody can take in order to lower your baby's risk of SIDS, is always placing them to sleep on their backs. Whether it's nap time or whether it's nighttime, we always have to place them there. And never place them on their side, because when they're placed on their sides, a lot of times they're more likely to roll over onto their stomachs. So what we found, though, is parents have a lot of concerns, and especially parents and caregivers, about putting them on their backs. And one of those concerns is, or the biggest concern is actually, what if the baby spits up or throws up? So we like to show you this diagram of their anatomy. So on the bottom is their esophagus, okay? So that's the tube that the spit up is going to come from their stomach. And then the trachea is their windpipe. So if they happen to spit up, that fluid is going to stay in the back of their throat. They're going to swallow because it's a natural reflex we all have, and it's going to go back to their stomach. However, if you put them on their stomachs, that anatomy is reversed. And now if the fluid comes out, the gravity is going to pull it even closer to the trachea or the windpipe, and it could potentially harm them. And so they have studied this really, really closely, and they know that since they've started the Back to Sleep campaign over 20 years ago, that there have been absolutely no increased risks of babies dying from aspiration. Now, the only thing that you might need to do differently is if your baby has such severe reflux that you are seeing a gastroenterologist or a specialist for it, they might tell you to do something a little bit different. But all babies spit up, it's just natural. And so if your baby is spitting up, you don't ever want to place them on their stomachs. You just want to keep them in an upright position after they eat for quite some time to let that, that all of that fluid or breast milk or formula get digested. And then once they fall asleep, you're going to lay them back down on their back and always on their back. Again, unless told by a physician or a specialist that you need to do something different. So, when we started the Back to Sleep campaign, again, we saw that death rate cut in about half. So we are now seeing over 3,600 babies and infants dying, and it's still too many. And so we went back and looked at it and looked at all of the crime scene reports and the medical examiner's reports. And what we found was that these babies, the majority of them were being placed on their backs, but they were being placed in unsafe sleep spaces. So what they were determined then was these deaths were actually suffocations and strangulations because of these unsafe sleep spaces and sleep surfaces. And these are the ones that are totally preventable. So what we saw that a lot of them were due to bed sharing. So that was the infant sleeping in the bed with the mom and the dad or the sibling or a caregiver. And they used different types of soft bedding. We'll talk about all about what that is. And also other types of unsafe sleep spaces. And we'll talk about all of the specifics about what those unsafe places are and where is that safe place. So several years ago, the National Institute of Health, Child Health and Human Development Department decided to change their Back to Sleep campaign to the Safe to Sleep campaign that absolutely does state we always have to place our babies on their back, but we have to place them in that safe sleep space. So the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with their risk reduction recommendations in 2011 and then updated again in 2016, and we're going to go over those, the majority of those today. So we do know that babies who are exposed to smoke when they're in utero, when they're being formed, die at higher risk from SIDS. Not only that, it's just because of the way that all of their chemicals and cells are being developed, and they have those other harmful toxins and chemicals in the body that are hindering that. But then when they get outside into the physical environment, once they're born, if they're in an environment where there's smoking going on, they die at much higher rates from SIDS. So people will tell us, well, we don't smoke in the house, or we don't smoke. If we smoke in the house, we don't smoke around the baby, or we'll go over to the window. That's still not good enough. Absolutely no smoking in the house whatsoever. Everybody needs to go outside. What happens is we all know the effects of secondhand smoke when we're around smoke. But then also when you're smoking, it can get on your clothes, on your skin, in your home. It sticks to your carpet, to your furniture, and all those types of things. And those babies, they're up next to us, or they're, laying on the floor, or they're, laying on the couch next to us, and that still is going to get into their systems. And then at some point, the babies put their hands in their mouths, and so it's getting into their system as well that way too. So no smoking whatsoever around that baby at all. As a matter of fact, in 2016, the state of Virginia enacted a law that said if you are caught smoking in a car with children in your car, it is a violation because it's so important to keep the babies away from that. So if you're a smoker, try to do everything that you can. Number one, just to quit for the health of yourself and your children. There are all types of programs that are out there. Carilion Clinic has a program to help you stop smoking, and the health department does. And so, look into one of those, or at least try to at least cut down the amount that you smoke, or don't smoke around, and don't ever smoke around your baby or your children. We also know that when we're pregnant, we need to not be drinking alcohol or using any type of illicit drugs other than a drug that's prescribed by our physician or OBGYN. So again, it just affects the way that baby is being formed in your body. But we also know that babies who are born and come into environments where there's smoking and drug use going on die at much higher rates of SIDS. Because when we're under the influence of alcohol and drugs, we become inebriated or intoxicated. Our brain isn't functioning the way it needs to be. Our reactions are slower, and we're probably just not making good choices. We could pass out, we could black out, and have no idea what type of environment that baby is in, or if we're holding the baby or anything like that. So the only safe way to drink, if you do drink and not have any of those impairment types effects, is for women, it's 1 drink a day, and for men, it's only 2 drinks a day. But just make sure that when you have that infant in your home, that you try to not be utilizing drugs and alcohol. But one of the things that you can do to protect your baby is make sure that you breastfeed them. So you can breastfeed them up to 6 months is great. Up to a year would be even better. But any type of breast milk they can get into their system is going to be a protective factor from SIDS, and also protective factor from different other things like allergies and asthma and um, childhood obesity and ear infections. So we understand that some moms just don't like the concept of breastfeeding or don't like the way it feels. So if you would at least consider even just um, pumping and getting that breast milk into a bottle, it's going to be the best thing that you can do for that baby, whether it's, 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever it is, get as much of that into them as they can. Now, formula fed babies are going to be fine, but we cannot make the amazing human breast milk in a factory. So if you can do anything to get some of that breast milk into your baby as long as you can, it's going to be so beneficial for them. But whether you're breastfeeding or bottle feeding, when it's feeding time, especially in the middle of the night, we need to make sure that as soon as we get done feeding that baby and taking care of them, that they get placed right back into their crib or their bassinet. We don't ever want them to fall asleep in our bed with us or in a chair. So stay awake. If you have a partner in the home, they need to be up and make sure that happens. Or if you don't have a partner in the home, we do recommend you just take your cell phone and set an alarm for about every 2 minutes. Something that nobody tells anybody, and this needs to be told to every single new parent, is that it takes around 2 minutes or sometimes even less than 2 minutes for a baby not to have the air and the oxygen that they need to breathe or to be in some type of compromised position before their body starts to shut down and they cannot be revived. And we are so tired when we're new parents, and if we're leaning back in that bed or laying on a recliner, leaning back in a recliner or in a rocking chair, and we happen to fall asleep and that baby gets in a position where they're compromised, we doze off for way more than 2 minutes. So keep yourselves alert, keep yourselves awake, and get that baby into their bassinet or their crib. And so just like this picture shows, we really highly recommend that you put that crib or that bassinet in your bedroom. We say room share, room share, room share, but you cannot ever share a bed with a child or with an infant. It is one of the most dangerous places for that infant to be. So, when we're holding that infant, if we happen to doze off and they're in the bed with us, we can roll over onto them. The babies can roll up next to the side of us. We can just get an arm over their face and their mouth, and they can't get the air that they need to breathe. These tiny babies, they have no head and neck control. They have no upper body control or physical development, and they have no voice. They can't kick us or move themselves away or turn their head and get a breath and say, hey, get off of me. So we just want to make sure that you never have them in that bed with you. And also, the other thing that happens is they can get in with underneath the blankets and the pillows and the comforters and all those types of things. And it can be very harmful and cause them to suffocate with that way too. So there's all types of things that are out on the market. We do recommend that you don't ever utilize these types of devices. They're called nests, or there's one called a Docketot. Again, there's all different types of names. Babies should never be placed to sleep in these types of environments. Babies start to wiggle and move. They can get themselves up against all of the cushion, around it, and they can't get the air that they need to breathe. And again, even though it's a little nest on the inside of your bed, you can still get an arm over, or you can still get blankets and pillows and that kind of stuff over them. So American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that you never utilize anything in your bed or place any baby or infant in anything other than a bassinet or a crib. But we do know in the middle of the night, you might get the baby up and need to feed them. If you feel like you're going to need to be in your bed and you're going to stay in your bed, the American Academy of Pediatrics says this is what your bed needs to look like. It needs to be completely bare, because we talked about how dangerous all of those big pillows and comforters and sheets and that type of thing are for your baby. And if you happen to fall asleep and doze off and you wake up and you realize that that baby is with you, get them back on their back into their own crib or bassinet immediately. We have parents that will tell us, well, I'm a light sleeper. I'll know if something happens with my baby. You're not. We can't control those stages of sleep that we go through, and it's just not worth the risk. So what is that safe sleep space? It's actually a safety approved crib. So if you're using a crib that was manufactured before 2012, it is no longer safe to use. So any crib that you get that may have been through passed down from generations, or you got it at a flea market sale or something like that. If it has a drop side, you cannot use it. So safety standards are that cribs cannot have drop sides, because unfortunately the drop sides were malfunctioning and we had kids being entangled and strangled in the drop sides. Now your mattress will drop, and that's fine. So you'll have it raised up when the baby is young, and as they start to show signs of rolling over and pushing themselves up, you need to raise it down so they can't get out of that crib. But the sides cannot move. And in that bassinet or that crib, it has to have a firm, tightly fitted mattress. A firm mattress. Again, babies cannot handle the cushiony, soft, comfortable things like we do as adults. We love the down pillow top type of comforters. We love the egg crate or memory foam type things that we'll put on top of our beds. Babies get nuzzled too far down into that and cannot get the air that they need to breathe, and then can suffocate. So it has to be firm, has to have a tightly fitted sheet. If it's a bassinet, it needs to be a bassinet sheet. If it's a crib, it has to be a crib sheet. So you never want to use a regular bed sheet on a crib or a bassinet, because again, it can be too big and the baby can get entangled in it, strangled by it, or something like that. And then when we're holding a baby or putting a baby down to sleep, we also never want to put them to sleep on anything, again, other than that crib or that bassinet. That a baby should never sleep on a couch, an armchair, or in a bed with even with a sibling. So here, these are actually photos of crime scene investigations where we have found babies that have unfortunately passed away because of the sleep environment. So you can see, like, sleeping on a couch with an adult. So not only can that child get into all that soft cushiony things of the couch, then you have 100 or 200-pound adult up next to you, squeezing you, and putting all of that pressure on you, and it's just not safe. Or a child that's just been laid down on a couch by themselves, they start to wiggle and move and do things that before you'd never know it, and they get stuck in between the cushions and crevices, and they can't get themselves out. And then on the right-hand side, it's a baby that was sleeping in a bed with an adult, and it was up against the wall, and had no sides to keep the baby in safe, and the baby got unfortunately stuck between the side of the wall and was suffocated and strangled because of that. You also never want to put a baby on like a water bed or an air mattress or anything like that. It's just not firm enough, and it's not safe. Other things that you never want to allow your baby to sleep in are going to be all of these devices. So a bouncy seat, a stroller, a swing, or even a car seat carrier. And that, every time I say that, it kind of freaks parents out. When you're transporting your baby and they fall asleep in the car, that's fine. Okay. But when you get to your intended destination, you've got to take that baby out, get them flat on their back, and get them in that bassinet or that crib. And you need to make sure that you tell everybody that you know the same thing, your daycare providers, your grandparents. So whether it's your bouncy seat, your swing, your car seat, if the baby falls asleep in those, you have to take them out. What happens is the babies are not flat on their backs, and because of the position that their bodies are in, they start to move around. They can get their heads up against the sides of these devices and can't get the air that they need to breathe. And because they're inclined type of devices, their heads come forward and it cuts off their airway and they can't breathe. The other thing that happens with all of these devices is your swings, your bouncy seats, your car seats, they all have harness straps in them. They're safety harnesses. So when these devices are used as intended, it's keeping them safe. However, when a baby is left to sleep in these nap time or nighttime, they get entangled in the harnesses as well, and it becomes a strangulation hazard. So they should never sleep in these devices. You also want to never put a baby in any type of sling. So American Academy of Pediatrics says like a sling carrier, like in the middle picture here. Again, it's because of the positioning of the baby's head and neck, and because of all that material around the baby. They can't keep their airway open, and they can't get the oxygen that they need to breathe. Be careful really about the baby wearing as well. So if you have the baby up against you in the upright position, you have to make sure that their head is turned to the side, so their mouth and their nose are not up against your skin or your body. So their head has to be turned to the side so they can get the air that they need to breathe. And on the left, this is a little Moses basket. So these are kind of coming back. It's like a little portable bassinet, but too much cushion around it. It's not a firm surface, and the baby got themselves wedged in that. They were placed on their stomach and then got themselves wedged in it. and we're not able to get away from all of that soft, cushiony type of thing. And we understand all of that stuff looks comfortable, but unfortunately for infants, it is very, very dangerous. So one of the newest recalls that we're seeing are these inclined, they're called rock and plays, or inclined type of sleepers. So back in 2019, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out and said these have all got to be taken off the market. So we shouldn't even be seeing these, but we're still seeing them, on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and that type of thing. So again, it's because of the positioning of them. And so you don't ever want to utilize these for your baby when they are sleeping. So that crib or that bassinet has to look just like this. It has to be a safety-approved crib or bassinet, and it has to be completely clear of any type of clutter. So what we mean by that is no pillows, no comforters, no stuffed animals, absolutely nothing in that crib. And again, it just looks stark and cold, but that is the safest way that your baby can sleep. And guess what? Your baby doesn't know anything different. We also say no bumper pads. But when you go to the store and you get ready and make that baby's nursery up, you get all of that stuff. It all comes together. After a year of age, you can place that all back into the crib or that sleep space. But from birth to a year of age, all of that has to stay out. The bumper pads, we get it. The parents think, oh my gosh, what if the baby, knocks their little head up against the rails of the bed. They might get a little bit of a bruise, but that's not going to harm them. Bumper pads are a strangulation and a suffocation hazard, and it's just not worth the risk. And no blankets or top sheets. So again, only that tightly fitted sheet, and that bed needs to be completely bare. Well, then how are we going to keep the baby warm? We love to swaddle our babies, right? And swaddling is really good, and it can help soothe the baby. But we swaddle babies in blankets, and babies are never supposed to be in a bed with a blanket. So what we want to utilize then is what we call these little wearable blankets that you can get. And in our hospitals, they will send you home with one of these if you have a baby at a Carilions hospital. Just like a little sleeping bag that you zip up around them. Needs to be the right size though. If it's too big, again, it can get up over their face and it can be a suffocation hazard. So try to get as many of these as you can. They're not readily available in stores, but you can, however, these would be really great things to find at secondhand shops and those types of places. But if you can't find them, what we want to utilize is the fleece footed sleepers. But most parents and caregivers would never think about putting that on their baby in the middle of summertime or in the spring, but now that takes the place of the blanket. So you can put their little pajamas on and then put the fleece footed sleeper over the top of them, and that's all that they need. And one thing that they did find is that babies who overheat are at higher risk of dying from SIDS. And so we just historically will put the little onesie on, and then we'll put their pajamas on, and then we'll have them swaddled in a receiving blanket, and then have some other type of soft cozy blanket around them and a hat on their head, right? Well, if you notice that they are warm to the touch, if they have little sweat beads on their nose, if their hair is wet, if their face is flushed, we've got to take some layers off. So babies really only need one more layer than what an adult needs. And actually a baby should never ever have a hat on their head once they leave the hospital. And nobody tells us that. One of the biggest places we get rid of our body heat is through the tops of our heads. Infants do not have a fully developed thermoregulatory system yet. Their internal thermostat is not functioning well. And the only way that they can keep themselves cooled off is through exposed skin. And the biggest place we're going to see that is the tops of their heads. The other problem that we have with the hats is that, again, it just can be something that once that baby starts to move and wiggle around, that hat can get over their face and their nose and their mouth, and it can be a suffocation hazard. We're also seeing, we've started to hear of some stories and sad situations about our little baby girls who have those big bandanas on their heads have become an issue with suffocations and strangulations. So we get it. If you want to have a cute little cap or bandana on your baby's head, take a picture, or, if you're out and about and visiting, or you have visitors over and you're holding the baby. But once that baby goes down, nap time or nighttime, those hats and those bandanas have got to come off. So that's a lot of information, and those are just some of the specifics. But one of the biggest things or biggest challenges that we have when we're trying to educate parents is, you've been told different things from your parents and your grandparents and other family members, and it's because they probably raised us differently. And it's not that that infants weren't dying back when they raised us. Maybe we just didn't have the technology to discover the data and the statistics and the information and the ways to get it out like we do today. And so the easiest way I can try to explain this to anybody right now is that, yes, maybe, a lot of us survived, but there's, over almost 4,000 babies every single year and infants that don't survive. And we would not want it to be yours or your family member. And we know that we do everything that we can to keep these precious babies safe, right? So if it was nap time or nighttime, would you take your precious little baby and put them on the kitchen counter to sleep? Gosh, no, we wouldn't do that because they could fall and harm themselves or worse, die from that. If it was nap time or nighttime, would you put the baby down next to the swimming pool? No. Oh my gosh, that's not safe. They could drown, right? If you were going to go for a ride in the car or needed to go somewhere, are you going to put the baby in the back seat of the car and not put him in the car seat? No, because it's not safe, right? Well, this safety rule is really no different than any of the other safety rules or standards that we follow. And I would probably beg to tell you that it's probably one of the most important safety rules that we need to follow with our infants, because falls are not the number one reason babies die. Drownings are not the number one reason infants die. Motor vehicle crashes are not the number one reason infants die. The number one reason infants die is because they've been placed in unsafe sleep environments. They've been placed in beds with parents and caregivers or siblings. They've been placed on adult beds, on couches, on armchairs. They've been placed to sleep in, bouncy seats and swings and car seats. So again, this is probably one of the most important things that you can do for your infant in order to keep them safe. And we put it in that perspective. I think it makes it a little bit easier for all of us to understand. And this is just a short little video from Safe Kids, the coalition that we work with at Carillion Children's, that shows exactly how these precious babies need to be sleeping. So it just takes a few seconds to keep them safe. And I know it's a lot of information, but if we can just kind of maybe remember the ABCs, a baby always sleeps alone, never with parents, caregivers, or siblings. The baby always sleeps alone. B, the baby always sleeps on their back, never on their side, whether it's nap time or nighttime, they always have to be placed on their back to sleep. And C, the baby sleeps in a safe crib that is free of any type of clutter. So again, no blankets, no pillows, no bumper pads, absolutely nothing in that crib. So I want to thank you today for taking the time to learn about safe sleep. Please feel free to reach out to me. You can email me, you can give me a call if you want any further information, and or if you want me to come and give this type of presentation to any type of group that you are involved with. So everything that we do through Carillion Clinic at our community outreach department is a free service. So we would love to be able to get this information out to as many people as we can. So thank you again today for taking the time to listen and to educate yourself. Please help spread this word and help keep your baby safe.